Alrighty, today we're working on lesson 9, portioned assessment / mill rate. This topic today and the topic tomorrow are going to tie together to talk about property taxes. So, municipal taxes are collected by the local municipal government. So your local area, like Winnipeg, they tax residential, commercial, businesses, and farms. So basically, any type of property, if you own any type of property, you have to pay taxes on that. When you first buy it, you have to pay tax, and then every year you have it, you have to pay more tax. So this tax never goes away. You're gonna have to keep paying this for the rest of your life. It's not like your mortgage where eventually you'll stop paying that because you've just paid it off. Property taxes, you're gonna have to pay forever. Now the reason you have to pay it forever is because they use property tax to help pay for things in your area, like getting roads fixed or having transit or schools, stuff like that. They use this municipal property tax. So to figure out how much they have to charge everybody, they have to determine their municipal operating budget. Like how much do they need to pay for things? So how much money do they need to pay for infrastructure, which is like roads, bridges, parks, stuff like that, and services. A big service that comes out of that we use property tax for is education. We get more money from the government, as the federal government as well, but that's a different problem. Education, transit, community centers, stuff like that. I'm just gonna put comm centers, stuff like that. So your area, whatever area you live in, you have slightly different property taxes, and that money goes towards things in your area, fixing them. They figure out how much money do we need for the year to pay for everything we want to do, and then they divide it by everyone who is in the area. So they need to know how much money we need, and they need to know how much taxable property, how much everyone's property is worth in the area, so that we can divide it properly. So for example, if you have a really, really gorgeous, giant, major, big house that's all renovated, your house is worth more, you're going to pay more in property tax. If your house is maybe kind of tiny and it's just on this tiny plot of land, yada yada, you're going to pay less in property tax. But what they do is they add up how much everybody's house is worth, they divide it, and then they figure out how much the property tax is going to be. So that's kind of the mill rate, and we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so here's the weird thing, and this is how they've calculated it, just to make it more complicated, I guess. It's called a portioned assessment. So portioned assessment is a percentage, or like a portion, of a home's value that is taxed. So let's say your house is worth $200,000. You only get taxed on part of that. You don't get taxed on the whole $200,000. You only get taxed on a portion. So for residential, like houses, it's a 45%. So if your house was let's say $100,000, you only get taxed on 45% of that, which would be $45,000. $45,000. So you only get taxed on a portion. Now, I think the reason why they do this is because residential is 45%, commercial is 65%. So they can kind of set up like different areas of this. So like retail stores, warehouses, stuff like that, 65%. Railway is only 25%. And golf courses is only 10%. I think they do this so they can kind of distinguish between what is this land used for. If you're using this land to make a profit, well, we're going to tax you more on it. You're just living there, going to tax you a little bit less. A golf course, which is like a beautiful green space, we're going to tax you less. So that's why we have a portioned assessment. So kind of our first step is to figure out how much is your house worth and how much of that worth can be taxed. Land portion assessment and building portion assessment are calculated together. Or separate, and then they're added together. So it makes you one property assessment. Like my house, they give me one property assessment. They say this is how much your house and land are worth together, and then this is how much you owe in property tax. Joe Kerr owns a single-family residential house in Thompson, Manitoba. The market value assessment of the land is $6,900, and that of the building is $67,900. Determine Joe's portion assessment if the portion percentage for a single-family home in Thompson is 45%. Okay. Let's go total value first. Like, how much is this place worth if you were to sell it right now? Because you're not going to sell the house and then the land separately. That's weird. Because, you know, how would you live on the land? That'd be weird. Okay, so anyway, $6,900 plus $67,900. So if you were to sell this house right now with the land, you would probably sell it for this much. That's what this assessment is. And now if ever you get this in the mail and they say this is how much your house is worth, you can actually appeal it and you can say, no, I think it's worth a different amount. When you say it's worth more, you have to pay more taxes. So that's not always the best thing in the world. If you say it's worth less, you have to pay less property taxes. But if you ever want to sell the house in the future, you want people to think it's worth a lot. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. And, you know, it's an appeal process. It's not a they just listen to you process. Now let's find the portioned assessment. So we're going to use this formula up here. The market value of the home, as in how much it's worth. So value times by portioned percentage times by percentage. So the value of the home is $74,800 times by the percentage, which they told us was 45 for a residential. We do have to change that to a decimal, so we're going to multiply by 0.45. And I got $33,660. So this is how much his house is worth, but they only look at this amount to make him pay taxes on. So he doesn't pay taxes on the whole thing, he only pays taxes on this much. It's like if they said you're buying a shirt for $20 and you only have to pay taxes on half of it, $10 worth of it. It wouldn't be as much taxes. It's just what they do. What does the portioned assessment mean? This is the taxable portion of the property. So you have to pay taxes on this much, not the whole amount. So this is the taxable portion of the property. All right, now this is really important to understand these property taxes for when you do own your own home, because it ends up being a lot of money every year. I think our property taxes is in like the few thousand range. A few $1,000s every year is a lot of money. And number one, you have to have that money ready to spend, ready to pay for every month. I pay it every month. You could pay it every year if you wanted to. And two, you need to understand the changes in services that are happening in your area. So when you elect your municipal government, like your the people who make these decisions for you in your area, like getting a new library, getting a new school or something like that, you need to understand that when that happens in your area, you have to pay more taxes for it. So they're important topics. All right, so let's talk about mill rate now. Mill rate is basically the property tax rate. Like our PST is 5%. That's basically what mill rate is. It's basically like a on every dollar you spend, you pay this much in tax. That's all that it is. It's just kind of a weird word in my opinion. So the rate of tax per every $1,000, they just specifically use $1,000 because it could be a pretty small number, of the relevant part of a home's value calculated by a municipality. So they figure out this tax rate by going, how much money do we need and how much do all of those portioned assessments add up to? Like how much value is in our neighborhood? If we have a really expensive neighborhood, this is going to be a really high amount. But when we have a really expensive neighborhood, typically people want really nice things, so we might need more money for it anyway. And then we times it by 1,000. Now It's 1,000 when normally you think it'd be 100, right? Because it'd be like 100%. No, it's $1,000 over here. So we got to keep that in mind. So mill rate is the tax rate. We'll just add this in right here. Used to find property taxes. So we're going to find out what the mill rate is in this question, and then we'll use mill rate in our next topic tomorrow. So the municipality operating budget requires $5 million to be raised from property taxes. So they need $5 million to do the projects they want to do. The total portioned assessment of all the taxable properties is $252 million. As in, we took each portioned assessment from each house, each golf course, each commercial property. We added it all up in the area and it added up to this. Determine the property tax rate expressed as a mill rate. So basically, find the mill rate. So let's use this formula right here, mill rate. Total revenue required divided by total portioned assessment. And then times by 1,000, not 100, 1,000. Just be really clear about that. All right. So how much money did they require from the neighborhood? They require $5 million. All the taxable properties added up to $252 million. And we're going to times by 1,000. So I usually do this first, the 5 million divided by the 252 million. Then I times by 1,000. We're going to round this to 2 decimal places, just like always. And here's the weird thing. The unit is mils. So 19.4 mils. It's basically like saying 5% tax. Same thing, 19.4 mils. The higher this is, the more tax you're going to have to pay every year. The lower it is, the less tax. And mil is just the unit. So this determines how much each property owner should pay. We have a little formula we're going to use tomorrow to help figure that out. If we have more services, nicer stuff in the area, more services in the community, that would equal higher mill rate. You want nice stuff, you got to pay for it. Not crazy, right? Having said that, if you have more valuable or more commercial or something like that, more valuable properties in the community, that would be lower mill rate. All right. So the more stuff you want to have in the neighborhood, the more you're going to pay. The more expensive each property is, the less the mill rate is going to be. So it'll just depend. Give this some practice, please. Let's see how it goes, and then have a good night.